Hello, today we're going to draw 9 rectangular prisms, 3 above the horizon line, 3 on the horizon line, and 3 below the horizon line. Please repeat the name of the SketchBook Express drawing application icons after me. Gallery, Add New Sketch, I for Information, Undo Arrow, Redo Arrow, Brush Editor, Draw Styles, Free Draw, Line Tool, Rectangle Tool, Circle Tool, Symmetry, Text, Transform, and Layers. We're going to begin by adding a new layer. That layer is going to have our grid on it, so we'll use our Flower Plus to go to the photo library and bring in our grid from our camera roll. Once we get that grid on here, we do need to transform it. Select Transform. The fourth icon is Scale. Scale looks like 2 squares. It gives you a red push pin and allows you to scale or resize that grid based on the location of the push pin. Once I've filled up the screen, I'll press Done, go back to Layers. I'll use these 2 rectangles on the right-hand side to move that to the bottom layer, highlight my blue layer that I'll be drawing on, and reduce the opacity on it to about 90% so I can see that grid bleeding through in the background. Alright, we're ready to draw now. Use 2 fingers to pinch your screen and reduce the overall ratio of your drawing space to about 90%. That way you can draw all the way to the edge. That's really important when we add our horizon line. Let's pick the pen tool and make your lines very dark, and we use the line tool to create our horizon line that we're going to orient our 9 rectangular prisms around. As with previous perspective drawing assignments, make sure that you use the lines on the grid to help you create lines that are parallel and perpendicular. If you draw your line all the way across off of the drawing board onto the workspace, which is gray, then you can fill your grass with green. It's not required, but it does help you remember that the horizon is the point where the sky meets the earth. Let's add some text in here. We are working on linear perspective. Move text to move it with the stylus. And we also need to label our horizon line. We need to own that word. We're going to add 1 vanishing point in. Just like we did when we were drawing with 1-point perspective, we need that vanishing point. We need those perspective lines, which are guides to help us set up our rectangular prism. And we need that horizon line so we know where we're drawing to. Here are our 3 rectangular prisms on the horizon line, 3 above the horizon line, which we can see the bottom of since we're looking up, and 3 below the horizon line, which we can see the top of since we're looking down. So step 1 is to draw our horizon line. Step 2 is to add our vanishing point. We'll move on to step 3, 4, and 5 now. So there's our vanishing point, just 1 dot on the horizon line. We can label it vanishing point or VP. Next, we're going to use our rectangle tool to add our 3 rectangles that are on the horizon line. Let's not make these too large today. And actually, I want to switch back to my pen tool because it gives me a thinner line. But we're going to need a lot of space on our iPad screen. We're doing 2 to the left of the vanishing point and 1 to the right. And then we'll use Line Tool to draw those lines from each corresponding corner to the vanishing point. Make sure they all converge precisely the same place. If you don't like it, like that one, press Undo and try again. So notice all of these boxes which are on the horizon line only get 2 perspective lines because we can't see the top or the bottom of them. They're at eye level. They're on the horizon line. And as we see in step 7, we'll go ahead and add those vertical edges, making sure that we use our grid in the background to get our lines parallel, the edge we're constructing with the edge that it is running alongside. Those need to be parallel. You can make your boxes as deep as you want, but it is imperative that you follow that grid so that these 2 lines end up parallel Those turned out really nice. Now step 8 would be to erase those guidelines. In SketchBook Express, we're going to turn our opacity back up, use a paintbrush with free draw, pick up that blue color, and then you can paint over all of the blue lines. You may have to zoom in so you can paint carefully without erasing any of your letters or marks that you need. When I'm doing a lot of erasing or painting over like this, I do a lot of picking my stylus up. That way, if I do a little too much like that and I cut into my box, I can just press undo, get that part again, zoom in, be a little more careful, and try it again. Then you can pick up the green color and do the same thing. Paint over the green parts that you don't need. And if you wanted to, you could use line tool and go back over your rectangular prisms in case you took any small pieces out of the lines like I did that one. That's okay for our intents and purposes. That accomplishes our goal of 3 rectangular prisms on the horizon line. We'll continue to use pen tool with a dark color and rectangle tool to draw our 3 boxes above the horizon line next. Again, 2 to the left of your vanishing point and 1 to the right. So we can try all 3 of those perspectives and use a line tool. This time we're going to do 3 lines from each box to the vanishing point. Now notice I cannot see my grid right now, so I'm going to have to go back into my layers, reduce the opacity on the layer I'm currently drawing on, and bring my grid back. So let me reduce my opacity down to about 90% so I can see that grid again. I'm going to zoom in so we can really focus on it, and you can see how I'm using that grid to create a line that's parallel. That one did not turn out good. Let's try one more time. Now those 2 lines look parallel. That looks great. Then we just need to erase the perspective lines. Now we have a lot of crisscrossing lines of linear perspective. So we're not going to paint over these lines right now. We'll come up with another approach to be able to have our finished product of our rectangular prism. Let's go ahead and do our 3 rectangular prisms that need to be below the horizon line. So that moves us forward to page 11, step 17. We start with 3 rectangles below the horizon line. Again, we'll do 2 to the left of the vanishing point and 1 to the right of the vanishing point. So we get practice working from multiple angles, multiple perspectives. There are 3 rectangles. Now we'll use line tool to draw the lines that connect from the appropriate vertices. Each one of these will have 3 lines which move to the vanishing point. If you don't connect right on the corner like I did not on that one, please undo arrow and try again. None of those worked out well, and I need 1 more line here. Now again, when we finish with these, we're going to fill them with color, so they will not be transparent. Therefore, we do not draw a 4th line from this 4th vertex on the rectangle. Now these lines of perspective are simply a guide for us. We will use the grid also as a guide to be able to put our edges on here. Again, those 2 lines should be parallel, and this side edge should be parallel with that side edge. And I'm tracing right over lines on my grid. You may wish to zoom in to be more accurate with this. Let's zoom in so we can follow that line on the grid precisely. Accuracy is extremely important when working with the grid. Good. Now, according to our handout, we should now spend some time erasing those perspective lines. However, instead of doing that, let's take a different approach. Let's add in a third layer, and then we'll draw right on top of what we've already done. Let's reduce the opacity on this layer even more. That new layer will reduce the opacity of just slightly so we can see through to the layer behind it. And we'll use our rectangle tool, and let's draw in a different color. Let's draw in blue this time. That will help us with our accuracy. Now, when I do these rectangles, I always start in the same place. Top left corner, pull to the bottom right. If it doesn't work out just the way I want, I'll undo and try again. So I'm just trying to trace back over these rectangles. And we're just going to redraw them on this third layer using the guidelines we've created. But instead of doing a lot of messy erasing, now we can just use line tool and trace over all the lines we've constructed, which is probably a lot neater and quicker than doing erasing or painting over like we would have had to have done. May help to zoom in even more so you can be very precise in tracing those lines. Then we can see how it looks by filling it up with color. And that is my rectangular prism drawn in perspective. Let's continue doing the same with all 9 rectangles. Make sure your vertices connect. Notice we can still see that grid. So if our lines didn't turn out perfectly parallel when we were doing our lines of perspective, we can correct that now. And we can get a look at what that layer is going to look like. If you open up your layers palette and tap the eye icon, it will hide the other layers and help us see what our finished product should look like. Make sure that you highlight the drawing layer. It should have the blue rectangle around it. Now this one we will have to do some erasing with, but that's okay. We did not fill this layer up with white. Therefore, we should simply be able to select an eraser, make the radius rather small so we can be accurate with it, and use free draw to erase part of that pink rectangular prism that's in the background. Use a rectangle tool to redraw this rectangle and make sure it's perfect. Oh, we'll have to do a little more erasing right here. Now, this is tricky, but it's important because this rectangular prism that is on the horizon line sits in front of the rectangular prism that is above the horizon line. We would see it first, so that's why we're spending some time to erase here. And just redrawing that rectangular prism a little bit.